enormous pleasure to be here and see so many familiar faces and old friends, many having come from Tokyo. Typically when people from the Foreign Service come into this room, we get really nervous because we have to defend our policy in front of the assembled minds sitting in the black chairs over there. So it's kind of relaxing and rather fun to be able to speak with you all without quite as much pressure, although in this case we do have three very, very smart, perceptive, and potentially critical members of the Japanese legislature to give marks on my remarks. What I would like to do today is just talk a little bit about the economic architecture of the Asia-Pacific region, various aspects of it, TPP being the most important and most timely topic for discussion, but also I'll touch a little bit upon the financing issues in the region, as well as some of the other organizations that are very active in the Asia-Pacific, such as APEC and ASEAN, to try and give a little bit of shape to the overall direction of what the United States, at least, is trying to achieve in the Asia-Pacific with respect to economic policy. The most important thing to remember right from the outset is that there is a strong and absolutely lasting, unshakable commitment by the United States to be a powerful force in the shaping and participation in the economic architecture of East Asia. There's obvious reasons for that. The East Asian region is a rapidly growing one, economically critical to the shaping of the rules of the entire planet, but also very, very important, increasingly important, to the United States' own economic future. And if our economy is not tied to the Asia-Pacific in significant ways in terms of trade relationships, in terms of technology relationships, in terms of finance, we will not grow and create prosperity in our own borders as much as we could otherwise. So that is the economic rebalance to Asia, and you've all heard the term rebalance, really has an outreach aspect of trying to be a participant in and shape the architecture of the Asia-Pacific region, but there's also, frankly, a very self-serving aspect to it for the United States, which is that in order for us to be prosperous in the future, we need to be actively engaged and a full participant in the region. So let me say a few words first about the most important topic, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement, which is currently under negotiation among the 12 nations on both sides of the Pacific. This agreement, as I believe all of you believe, will boost growth and competitiveness, supporting more jobs and raising wages in the United States and in all of our partner countries. Importantly, TPP is not just a tariff agreement. It's not even just an access and investment agreement or access and services, but it will establish high standards on labor issues, on environmental issues, on intellectual property rights, the protection thereof, on the participation of state-owned enterprises in the economy, and there's some very original aspects of TPP designed, and unfortunately I can't throw you a copy of it yet because it's still under negotiation, but there are aspects of this agreement which are quite unique and will make it more beneficial to small and medium enterprises than any free trade agreement ever negotiated before. Again, this agreement will cover 1/3 of all global exchange, and it will also have a distinct macroeconomic benefit to the participants. Economists predict, for example, that TPP will add $100 billion to Japan's GDP within 10 years. Concluding TPP is also, in a broader sense, to the broader group of countries in the Asia-Pacific, having a magnetic effect. It's attracting the interest of non-members across the region to the benefits that the TPP framework can offer. And even if they are not participating in TPP at this stage, this has an effect on them by incentivizing reforms like lowering tariffs and non-tariff barriers to trade and investment in a broad, region-wide sense. And also, we're finding that the non-TPP nations and economies of East Asia are watching the TPP negotiations very closely for clues on what the future will bring in terms of the rules of the road in the Asia-Pacific region. In fact, our hope is that TPP, in a rather broad sense, will unleash what in American English we refer to as a race to the top, as economies all work in various ways, including through voluntary approaches such as APEC, and also through their own bilateral arrangements and other aspects of their participation to try and reach these higher standards for how the economies of the region work. Even China, let me be clear on this point. TPP, and actually we've made enormous progress in convincing Chinese friends that TPP is not a conspiracy designed to contain the Chinese economy or restrain its growth. In fact, I think the majority of thoughtful people in China now recognize that this is good for the entire region, and at some point, China may even want to participate itself. But this race to the top is really having a fundamental impact on how all of the economies of the region are thinking. And let me use just a few words to describe how the United States views our objectives. Free, open, transparent, and fair. Open to all comers. Free in the sense of having the lowest possible barriers to trade and investment between nations. Transparent in meaning that all the rules are available for everyone to see and understand and follow. And fair, meaning that there is no unfair advantage for any kind of institutions to shape those rules in ways that are not transparent to their own advantage. That is the vision that the United States brings to the region. It's a vision that I believe Japan shares, and it will provide an important framework for economic growth going forward. Let me mention something about another aspect of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which we feel particularly strongly in the State Department, which is the strategic importance of this agreement. It's one thing to focus on the economic benefits of TPP, both in terms of its measurable dollar benefits and its policy shaping benefits, but we must not overlook the fact that economic policy and other aspects of foreign policy are inextricably interlinked. And one cannot overstate the very great significance of 40% of the global GDP, 40% declaring with one voice that they support freer trade and open trade, open economies, and higher standards. That will have a fundamental impact on the global system as well as on the region. But it also shows and is a manifestation of the strategic commitment of the United States to the Asia Pacific. Now, it's no secret that there's quite a little bit of debate going on right now about trade policy in the United States. And the fact that the U.S. is willing to engender that debate and willing to take on this difficult question of how an economy with a trade deficit should engage even more aggressively in the economics of the Asia Pacific. That willing to take that approach shows our commitment, our strategic commitment to the Asia Pacific region, I think in an extremely powerful way. I can't go through a speech without quoting my boss. There's a guy named John Kerry. He used to sit there. Now he's over. Actually, he's never in the State Department. He's always traveling someplace. But at one point, he was in Washington last Thursday, and he said the following: trade issues cannot be separated from larger questions about America's global leadership or about the choices yet to be made by our generation. If we retreat on trade, our influence in the global economy will diminish. And if our economic stature is in doubt, our ability to deliver on defense and political challenges will be increasingly questioned. In our era, the economic and security realms are absolutely integrated. We simply can't pull back from one without diminishing our role on the other. We have to be engaged in each. So I think I've made my point. The strategic element of this is absolutely overwhelmingly important, I believe, for the United States in concluding the TPP agreement and realizing its benefits. Let me say a word here about the special role of the United States and Japan in this context, and in the context of the U.S.-Japan relationship. Again, this is quite timely. Prime Minister Abe was in the building just down the street, speaking to a joint session of Congress just yesterday. And that showed the strength of the US-Japan relationship. But the TPP will show it in an even more powerful way, because it cements, really, in an irrevocable and absolutely strong way, the economic pillar of the US-Japan alliance. It's also a chance for the US and Japan to join hands in regional leadership by showing the rest of Asia that these two large democracies, open economies, will want to bring benefits to the rest of the region by bringing everyone up to standard. This is an approach that we, in fact, I'm quite proud that in 2010 and 2011, when I was involved in APEC, the US and Japan coordinated extremely closely in setting the agenda for APEC, which then helped set the agenda for TPP. Japan, in some ways, joined TPP late. The negotiations had already started. The ironic fact is that Japan was part of the central thinking that went into the agreement from the very beginning, and it's really it's great justice that Japan is now going to be here at the conclusion of that agreement. There's a Japanese economic aspect, and I'm not here to give a long lecture about Japanese politics, but there's enormous opportunity for Japan in concluding this agreement to accomplish overdue economic policy reforms, and also make sure that Prime Minister Abe's third era is a great success in driving forward structural reform in the Japanese economy. So I've talked a lot about TPP, and I promise to go beyond TPP, but let me say one last word with relation to trade, which is the question of Trade Promotion Authority. In order to make this most excellent agreement a reality, it is the fact that Congress needs to first provide Trade Promotion Authority to the administration. And I don't want to draw you all into a domestic debate on this, but let me just say, you've heard it before, but this administration strongly believes that TPA is in our national interest. Moving forward on the highest standard trade agenda in history, this allows Congress, TPA allows Congress to set tough, fair rules on future trade agreements, as well as on TPP as that agreement is being brought together. The TPA bill is a bill that puts workers first, with strong labor and environment protections, and it's also a bill that will allow us to grow our exports amid the new global economy. The new global economy is a different economy. It is more digital. It is more services oriented. One cannot rely on tariff reduction alone to stimulate trade. And TPP is designed in a way with rules on intellectual property rights, state-owned enterprises and the like, which will result in the maximum benefits both for the United States as well as the other 11 participants. So I promised I'd say a little bit beyond TPP, and let me concentrate today upon just regional architecture outside of TPP. There are other aspects as well. The World Trade Organization issues are bouncing along. We're looking for an environmental goods agreement, trade facilitation agreement to be finalized and implemented, a trade and services agreement. But let me just concentrate for today on the region itself. APEC. Has everyone heard of it? It is the design room. That's the right way to think of APEC. Is it is the design room for the rules and norms that will govern the Asia-Pacific economic system in the future. It is a voluntary forum that allows countries to come together at relatively low risk, because there's no dispute settlement when you make a voluntary agreement. And that builds their confidence and makes them more flexible, makes them more creative and more aggressive in thinking about the best rules for trade and investment and other aspects of economic policy, energy policy, environmental policy, participation of women in the economy. APEC has a very broad-ranging agenda aimed at bettering the Asia-Pacific's economic system in a broad sense, and it continues to be an extraordinarily effective institution, and I hope that it will continue to engender your strong support. ASEAN. The United States, you will have noticed, particularly under the Obama administration, has really redoubled our efforts to support the economic integration of ASEAN and the increased empowerment of that group of nations, both in a strategic sense, a political sense, but first and foremost in an economic sense. The ASEAN Economic Community will be launched at the end of this year. The United States has been very helpful, I believe. I would like for us to do more, but we have done quite a bit in helping with customs enforcement and trade facilitation programming, and the flagship of which is our ASEAN Single Window Customs Project, aimed at providing technological support and policy support for ASEAN as it brings its customs system into a more digital and more integrated environment. We also have the U.S.-ASEAN Business Alliance for Competitive Small and Medium Enterprises, aimed at bringing more SMEs from all the ASEAN nations in contact with U.S. companies and U.S. SMEs. And we're broadening our formal partner dialogue set of arrangements with ASEAN to expand into new areas such as aviation and the internet economy and the nexus between trade and environment. And then a final sort of government institution thing which I'll mention is the multilateral development banks, which have also gotten quite a bit of attention of late because of the emergence of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Over 7 decades, these institutions have evolved, and the effectiveness of the development banks, and they are very effective, stems from their core set of standards that reflect decades of collective experience and lessons learned. The existing institutions put a premium on good governance, environmental protection, social safeguards, debt sustainability, which means that you're not asking borrowers to incur more debt than they can afford to take on, and also procurement issues are important. And in all these respects, the existing institutions have done quite well. So we have now a new institution which has emerged, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And I won't belabor the point because the President spoke on this topic when he was standing next to Prime Minister Abe 2 days ago at the White House. But the fact of the matter is that I need to be crystal clear on this fact because there's been a lot of misperceptions that the United States is not opposed to this institution, never have been, and we've always been stressing the same point consistently, which is that we hope that this institution has the same kinds of standards, operates according to similar rules as the existing institutions. And then in that case, it will be able to cooperate very well with the existing institutions in promoting the development of infrastructure and expanding opportunities for infrastructure, spurring additional growth in the Asia-Pacific region. So the standards are important, and we will, as the United States, as, if you will, stewards of the global financial system, and I believe that Japan has the same view, will be quite, what's the right word? Quite persistent in saying again and again that these new institutions, as they merge, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank or the new BRICS Bank, when it emerges, that they respect the existing international order. And I believe that there's been some progress in this regard. But at the same time, we do very much welcome the additional capital which will be made available. The last point that one really needs to understand on this, and this brings me to my a broader conclusion, is that all of these institutions, whether it's in finance or in trade or in investment or the government regulation of trade and all the different arrangements and free trade agreements that we negotiate, pale in comparison to the influence of the private sector going forward. And this is where the United States and Japan really can make the most, have the greatest positive influence on the development of the region. Take, for example, this question of infrastructure. The Asian Development Bank has identified an $8 trillion gap between what the Southeast Asian region needs and the current trajectory for financing of infrastructure development. Asian Development Bank is a $150 billion institution. The new Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank may be a $50 billion institution when it starts. So I'm not a math genius, and I worked hard in high school and made it through, but there's a big gap between 8 trillion and a few hundred billion. And that has to be filled by governments raising their own revenue and by private sector participation in infrastructure development, but also other aspects of economic development. So it's just a fundamental fact that the biggest influence that we can have as governments is in facilitating private sector participation. As we do so, we should do so in ways that we create opportunities for all sizes of corporations, for workers as well as capitalists, and keep an eye on environmental protection. There's some basic fundamental principles of openness, of fairness, and the United States and Japan are two nations that represent those principles and that approach, that beneficial approach to economic development. So in closing, I am just extraordinarily optimistic about the direction of the Asia-Pacific economic region, both as an infrastructure, as an architecture, a set of institutions, but also as a reality that produces benefit for the people of the Asia-Pacific region. So thank you for coming. I think we're all looking forward to hearing from our august leaders from Tokyo. I know that we're going to hear some interesting thoughts, and I also look forward to hearing those as well. In the interest of time, I don't think I should take questions, right? Because we should keep it moving. So thank you all very much for your attention, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you.